Well, hello there, and thanks for stopping by. My name is Andy, and this is Chess Please. Yesterday, I uploaded a video on the Smith-Morra Gambit and said it was a great weapon to use against the Sicilian, and I showed a game where I played against a much higher rated player to devastating effect. I wanted to follow up that video with another video showcasing pretty much the exact same thing, me playing against a higher rated player with the Smith-Morra Gambit, just to show you how effective it can be. Let's jump on in. So today's game is against Brazilian player Denso, who was in the 1740s, I want to say, and we were just inches outside the 1700s. We were kissing it, and I think this game might have put us over the edge. I've gone up and down since then, so in and around that ballpark. As you might expect, given the nature of this video, it starts off with a Smith-Morra, just like we drew it up yesterday on the board. They accept the gambit, we get our knight out. They get their knight out, and again, no need to mess with the bishop, get your own knight out. And they do what we mentioned that a lot of the time is the pretty common response, is getting your D and E pawn onto the 6th rank, just to kind of clamp down on the center as much as you can, even if it is a bit more reserved. You're not going on to the 5th rank, but for that extra pawn you have, you kind of just want to turtle shell up a little bit. However, this is what we were expecting. We get castled, get our rook into the game early on. Knight comes on out. Here is the first mistake of the game. So we've got one mistake, one missed win, and one inaccuracy in this game. So not too bad. And those of you who've been following for a while know that's a lot better than we do normally. So anyway, first mistake of the game. I got white line fever, as they call it in rugby. I saw a knight on f6. In some cases with a knight on f6, e5 is a good move. None of those attributes are here. This pawn is here, this knight is here. It doesn't make a huge amount of sense. Anyway, I played it, and it wasn't like a devastating mistake, but essentially you're just giving away another pawn, which we didn't need to do. But my idea was, which actually came to pass, was that they'll take back there either with the knight and we'll trade off, or with the pawn, because I wanted to keep their king in the center of the board. That is a big plus when you have a lead in development, and like this I wanted to capitalize quickly, and if the king gets over to the side of the board, that's not really going to happen. You give them time to stabilize. Rightly or wrongly, that was my idea, and it worked out. The king ends up taking there, and now he's completely scuppered in the middle of the board. Bishop out here, just wanted to develop my bishop and maybe entice a little weakness, which is exactly what happens. We drop the bishop back to a pretty decent square here on e3, and notice that like this pawn is miles away from putting pressure on this bishop, and there's no d pawn left to put pressure on the bishop, so there's a pretty decent home here. They develop their bishop out, and we start to put pressure on the center. Like we mentioned in the video yesterday, you actually want to get your rooks on D and C rather than the more traditional D and E. And in this case, or what that means is, you want to put your F rook here on D, which again kind of skirting into the other side of the board, but obviously with the rationale being you're going to play rook A to C1. Now, the reason they played their king here is because this bishop is under fire, and there's actually no way to get another piece there, and it's also pinned, so it's not going to be able to get out of the way unless the king moves. And they do both. They break the pin and they get the king there in defense. Now, a very common motif, which we didn't cover off in a huge amount of detail yesterday, oftentimes in the Smith-Morra you'll see that this move, knight to b5, to pile more pressure onto the d file, which is yours, almost entirely yours for the point of a Smith-Morra Gambit. So knight in there to b5, attacking the bishop twice, no real great way to defend that twice, so the bishop just gets out of there with the pin having been broken. That's a-okay. This was a little bit greedy. I think it was fine, but essentially I didn't want the king backing into this corner and getting in away out of the center. Even with this rook a little bit cobbled in there, I still didn't want the king away in the corner, so I brought my bishop in just to kind of hem him out there. So we do that, we keep him in the middle of the board, and this is just kind of putting a little bit more pressure on. I was kind of worried about, I don't even know what I was worried about here, to be honest. I don't think it's a terrible move. It's a check, trading off their dark square bishop so we have a bit of supremacy here and reaffirm our control of the d file. It's kind of a trade for a trade's sake, which isn't what you really should be doing, but alas, it works out okay, and we have an absolutely monstrous bishop in here on d6 there as well. Pawn attacks the knight. That's a bit annoying, so we just get him out of there. That's absolutely fine. And now we finally get our last piece into the game. Probably a little bit late, if I'm being honest with myself, but no major boo-boos there. Bishop comes in here. Knight in here. This was the inaccuracy the computer said. This doesn't really do much. You can actually just drop the bishop back here for some reason, is what the computer likes. I couldn't tell you why. Maybe... No, couldn't tell you why. Anyway, we drop the bishop back here. Keep it in the game. A nice little flexible diagonal here. Yeah, that's how bishops work. Nice little flexible diagonal like this. So be it. And... No, not quite yet. So we get our knight into this, again, absolutely fabulous square. No dark square bishop to kick him out. You know, a lovely home for the knight to strike at pieces in the middle of the board. This was my mistake. This was the mistake of the game. And what it means was I actually had the chance to win a piece straight away here, or at least a pawn. Sorry, at least an exchange. But I didn't do it. I just played h3 here. Just generally when I see a pawn storming down the board, I like to meet him in there. Just let him know you're there, you know. But what we actually could have done was taken here straight away. So what happens is if we take here, then if knight takes, we can just take there. We're all gravy. If king takes, we can drop back here. And the computer had some manic lines here. I think there was something like knight here. And then you actually just take with the rook, I think is what they wanted. Then you take with the pawn. I obviously didn't see this. And once they take back with the pawn, then you have this lovely bishop check here. And king is forced to leave the defense of this knight. Probably here. And then you can go and rook like that. Like, of course I didn't see that. Although it's not like rocket science, but I didn't see it. And thankfully, the opponent even sweetened the pie after I missed it the first time by playing an absolutely disastrous move in g5. I kind of get it. They just want to attack here. They want to crack in, get some counterplay, having been on the back foot all game. But weirdly enough, that is a dreadful blunder. And the reason being is because now, when we take the bishop, if the king takes, this is still a discovery, but there's no defender of that knight anymore. So the knight drops back, and you know, if the king takes, for example, and we move the bishop out of the way with check, king would have to come here then. So king takes here, bishop here, which is check. King tries to come back here to protect the knight, but then again, it gives up this knight. So a whole rigmarole, all caused by this move g5. So they take with the knight. Do they? Is this the real game? Yeah, this is the real game. So they take with the knight, meaning we pick up this knight, and at this stage we're like, we've re-established parity. We've gotten a pawn back for our efforts from the Smith-Morra Gambit. We actually gave away 2 pawns in this game, but we'll say nothing. And now it's just ready to squeeze on out. And I really like the ending of this game because, again, we just see all of our pieces hugely involved. And the final pièce de résistance, we get the bishop out of there to put a bit more squeeze on this knight, but keep the pressure on this diagonal. And they move that rook there. Again, strange enough move that actually blunders. Mate in 2, if you can see it. I'll give you 3, 2, 1. And the reason I like it is because it gets our final piece into the game, and the whole mating net is set. Bishop to h5. All they can do, the king has nowhere to go. The only piece that can block here is the rook. So we go bang, bang. And my opponent actually resigned at this point because they probably saw only legal move is this, which delays the inevitable. So, just wanted to prove that I'm not a spoofer, that you can play the Smith-Morra. That's 2 games on the bounce where we've played it against really strong opponents and had an absolute whale of a time and managed to pick up the win, which is a nice byproduct. Morra, that's amore. Goodbye.